Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Obeisances unto the Supreme Being Vasudeva, who is everything that there is. Janmadyasya yato anvayaditaratascha artheshu abhignaswarat tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yatsuraya tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha dhamna svena sada nirastakohakam satyam param dhimahi. We meditate upon the transcendent absolute being from whom springs forth this universe. He is present in all that exists and yet distinct from everything. He is fully conscious and totally independent. He revealed to the first seer Brahma the import of Vedic wisdom. The material creation of three gunas appears in him as though real, like water in a mirage. Being eternally self effulgent, he is ever free of the illusory energy Maya. We meditate upon him, the Supreme Being. Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam shukamukadamritadrava sanyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. O devotees who relish a taste for divine love, Bhagavatam is the fully ripened fruit of the wish-yielding tree of Vedas, flowing as immortal nectar from the mouth of Shuka Brahma Rishi. Go on drinking this nectar again and again, day after day. So now we are entering the 12th chapter of the first Skandha of Bhagavatam. Here it's good to briefly pause and look at what has happened thus far and what is the whole purpose of the first Skandha. The entire first Skandha is an elaborate introduction to Bhagavatam itself. We saw that the first three verses of the first chapter of the first Skandha is an introduction to the entire Bhagavatam first. It's the most succinct introduction, and we chant the first and the last verse every day. It contains the entire philosophy of the pure impersonal awareness and the personal form of the Supreme Lord, both being the play of the one truth, which is transcendent and absolute, and the mood of this Bhagavatam, which is sweet with devotion and love and goes straight to the heart. Now, similarly, as the first three verses introduce Bhagavatam in a very brief way, the entire first Skandha, which is 19 chapters, is an elaborate introduction to Bhagavatam. It covers a few things. One is, as we see, it brings forth how Bhagavatam unfolded. So we all saw in the very first chapter that it was told that Bhagavatam was asked to be narrated by the rishis to Suta Maharishi, and he in turn said that it was originally composed by Vyasa, taught to his son Shuka, and then it was narrated by Shuka to Parikshit on the banks of Ganga. So now the entire first Skandha is unfolding how all this happened. So there are essentially three main stories in Bhagavatam. One is how Vyasa came to compose Bhagavatam. Second is how Parikshit was born and what happened around his birth. And the third is how Parikshit will go on to essentially sit by the Ganga, taking a vow to fast unto death and listen to Bhagavatam. Once all these three are covered, then we enter the transcendental dialogue between Shuka Brahma Rishi and Parikshit. So, this entire first chapter is introducing how all of this unfolded through these three stories. So, we first saw the story of Vyasa, who was met by Narada and instructed to write Bhagavatam, and therefore he composed. The second major story is what happened after the Mahabharata war, where Krishna protected Parikshit in his womb or in his mother's womb, and thereby again delivered the Pandavas from another calamity, and then established Yudhishtira as a king and went back. And now the third is how Parikshit is born and what happens after he is born to the Pandavas, and how he becomes the emperor, and then why he goes to the Ganga. So we are on the cusp of the third story. The first two are over. That's one thing to note. The second thing to note is that, as we see in both the stories and in the coming third story too, the essence of all the stories is a spirit of pure surrender, love, and devotion. All the instructions of Narada to Vyasa emphasized the sweetness and the greatness and the glory of devotion, which reveals pure wisdom, true jnana, which is non different from bhakti. The second story, which is Krishna saving the Pandavas again, and thereby the prayers of Uttara, Kunti, and then Bhishma, all glorify again pure love of the Supreme Being and total surrender to the Supreme Being who is Krishna. Now, the third story will also emphasize the philosophical basis and the sweetness of devotion. So, that's the undercurrent of all the stories, and it will be the undercurrent of all the skandhas too. And the third interesting thing to note is that we saw Krishna appear in the first skandha in the last few chapters, which is like a prelude or like a little glimpse. It occurs to me that even in modern days, when people make biopics and so on, in the very beginning, they show the uh, ending portion of the hero, some great event that has happened already, and then they just show what is happening, and then the rest of the biopic unfolds as a flashback. This very device was in fact literally invented thousands of years ago by Bhagavatam, we can see. So there is nothing new under the sun, and everything is actually covered in the Vedas, in the Puranas, in the Itihasas. And this is also another device that is employed even today, and this finds its root in Bhagavatam, where we see a few chapters introducing Krishna toward the almost the end of his earthly avatar. After all the events have happened, his birth, his play in Vrindavan, his going to Mathura, then his going to Dwaraka, then his helping the Pandavas, then the war, teaching the Bhagavad Gita, then all of this has happened. And finally, in the last stage, Yudhishtira is established as the king and Krishna goes to Dwaraka. And that episode was shown in the very beginning to give a glimpse of the glory of Krishna. And then what will happen is the remaining Bhagavatam will be like an elaborate flashback of not just Krishna avatar, but all the avatars which preceded Krishna. So we saw already like an overview of the various avatars of Krishna or Narayana, and all these avatars will be dwelt upon very detailed manner, and each avatar will bring about the beauty of both the wisdom of the teachings as well as the sweetness of devotion in a very entertaining and beautiful way, as all these stories have so far. Very vivid, graphical. All of these are coming from Bhagavatam directly. If we simply read Bhagavatam verse by verse, it is like literally watching a beautiful live picture unfold in front of our eyes, frame by frame. And we see in that unfolding of the picture all the beauty, the sweetness all comes through. So that's the other thing to notice, is that we saw a nice elaborate preview of Krishna's pastimes toward almost the end of his earthly Leela. And then now, after Parikshit meets Shuka Brahmarishi and Shuka Brahmarishi begins his narration, it will be an elaborate flashback across many avatars leading up to proper Krishna avatar only in the 10th skandha. And each skandha will be so beautiful, increasingly sweet, as it leads up to 10th skandha, which is called the Samam Bonam, or the pinnacle of sweetness, the entire birth and activities of Krishna. So we have seen a glimpse of it. Now we are moving away from that to the birth of Parikshit. So with that, I thought we can just take this little um, pause to look at what's unfolded and how it's unfolding beautifully, and the device used by Bhagavatam to unfold this beautiful set of events. Now, going back to the 12th chapter, now that Krishna has settled down in Dwaraka, the scene shifts to Hastinapura again, and the rishis, who are the main dialogue happening in Naimisharanyam, the Shaunaka, the rishis headed by Shaunaka, are asking Suta Maharishi as to what's happening in Hastinapur now. Now that we know Krishna has settled down in Dwaraka, they are now curious about what's happening in Hastinapur. You did mention to us that Uttara had this child in the womb, and that was sought to be destroyed by Ashwatthama, and it was protected by Sri Krishna. And so now we want to know what happened after that, about the birth of this child and the exploits of this noble child, which we know is Parikshit, and how he came to Shuka and how he attained the wisdom of Bhagavatam and all that. So now Suta Maharishi continues his narration, picking up from Hastinapur again. So after Krishna left to Dwaraka, here Hastinapur was continued to be ruled by Yudhishtira, and Yudhishtira was this righteous king who was protecting his subjects like a father, taking care of everything. We already saw how prosperous and flourishing his kingdom was, and everything was happening perfectly. The rains and the agriculture and all kinds of activities were happening beautifully. People were happy, and Yudhishthira accumulated so many riches in a noble way. All his brothers were so loyal. They were just happy to serve Yudhishthira. This is the spirit of service that is very important, and that is the essence of um, the dharma, is to serve people who are in the right position and serve without any expectation. So the younger brothers, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, Sahadeva, they are just happy to serve Yudhishthira, and Yudhishthira is so happy to take care of them. There is no sense of possession or ownership of the kingdom. It is just seen as a collective enterprise. Yudhishthira sees himself as simply a representative of the Lord who has to take care. He's more like the real right approach of a king or a ruler is to be a caretaker and not to be some kind of lord, because there is only one Lord, which is the supreme being who takes care of everything. So, with this attitude, Yudhishthira was serving the kingdom, and all the brothers were serving him, and there was immense fame. Therefore, when the attitude of service is predominant, then leadership is beautiful, it's very natural, and people are happy. So, this is what is missing today: the servant leader. The leader has to be a servant and serving not anyone else, but serving the Lord, serving the Supreme Being, and seeing that that is the source of everything, and therefore serving Him by serving the people, recognizing that everyone, everything is a part of the same Supreme Being. The cosmic being, it's also called the Virat Purusha, the Supreme Being, is essentially one undivided entity. And just as there are so many leaves and branches and twigs in one giant tree, there are so many people, animals, various beings in this one cosmic body of the Supreme Being. So, with this recognition, recognizing that to serve the Supreme Being is to serve everyone, with the attitude of dovetailing them to recognize their true nature. Without that, simply serving the body or simply serving the giving education that is for winning bread is not going to help in the long run, but to give the wisdom that everyone is connected to the same source, and from that source to provide everything else, of course, food and education and all the rest coming from that source. So this is what Yudhishthira was doing. and therefore everyone was very happy. And Yudhishtira was always having Krishna in his heart and doing this, and the same with his brothers. So, meanwhile, Suta Maharishi says Uttara is carrying this little child in the womb, and one important thing happens, which Suta Maharishi mentions now. It happened when Krishna protected the womb of Uttara with this child. So when there was this Brahmastra launched by Ashwatthama, and Parikshit in the womb was being attacked by it, Krishna sent his Sudarshana Chakra, which is a very mystical weapon that acted as a shield and protected, therefore, Parikshit in the womb. And it is being reported now by Suta Maharishi that when this happened, Parikshit in the womb actually has this memory of beholding an effulgent being. So we have already seen this is been even shown by science now that the children, the baby in the womb does record memories. So that's why they even recommend playing very soothing music and so on, even now. And this was known even in the times of these itihasas. There are many stories. We'll see the story of Prahlad, who learned about devotion while in the womb. There is a story of Abhimanyu, who learned about archery in the womb. And similarly, and most beautifully, Parikshit here, it's told that he actually was able to behold some effulgent being, which is very precisely described. It was the size. So he later, of course, when he is born and after some time when he can speak, he presumably reports this. But it's said here that he saw an effulgent being the size of a thumb. And this is a very mystical observation that has been given in the Vedas too. That when this pure awareness, this pure supreme presence takes a form, that form is got some wonderful qualities. It's a mystical vision that the rishis have held, and they have even written suktams and so on. And this is how it is not by some whimsical imagination that the form of the supreme being is depicted in a particular way. This is based on a mystical vision of many, and this is the same vision that Parikshit has had, that this being was the size of a thumb, very charming in appearance, the color of yellow, golden color, and it was none other than a form of Krishna himself, Achyuta, and it seemed to have 4 arms. So that's why it's called Chaturbhuja. So this form is a human form, but not human because it has so many transcendent aspects to it. It has 4 arms. First of all, it's the size of a thumb, and it is normally said to be present in the heart space. That's why there is always a feeling of some kind of light that people have seen, and sometimes this sort of formless light takes a form. So this is described very precisely that Parikshit saw the size of a thumb, charming appearance in yellow robes, with 4 long arms, with pendants and red eyes, and with a mace. So it's the form of the Supreme Being as Narayana that he saw. And this form is called as the um, form of Vishnu, which is in the heart of everyone when one beholds this form through mystic vision, and which is also present as the pure awareness that is ever felt in the heart. So, um, on a related note, this is why in every culture, uniformly, when someone says I, they always point to the heart. They don't point to the head. They don't point to any other part of the body. Everyone points to the heart to say I, because instinctively the presence is felt in the heart, even though people are not aware of it. As to this presence is the source from which there is sentience coming, consciousness is felt, and that source is felt in the heart. And here Parikshit is beholding that with a form which is the form of Krishna. So that's the beauty of Krishna's form, or also the form of Narayana, is that this is the form that is seen also by mystics in the vision of meditation. And this is why we saw Narada also having a vision when he was in meditation after being a young child in that story. And similarly, Parikshit beholds the same vision, and many others have had this vision too. So Parikshit has this vision in the womb of this beautiful effulgent being, and so he has basically had a vision of Krishna as Narayana in his womb, and which quenched the fire and which basically delivered him. So after after the fire was put out, after the Brahmastra was extinguished, this form disappeared in the womb itself. And Parikshit somehow, through some grace, remembered this form even after he was born. And later it will say that this is why his name is Parikshit, because the word Parikshit comes from the word Pariksha, which means exam. So he was always examining outwardly in all places and in all experiences this one form that he beheld in his womb. So he was always looking for this form. This was his one um, goal. So just as in Narada's story we saw, Narada had one glimpse when he was this young boy of a maid servant, and after that the vision vanished. But Narada was obsessed with this vision, and he spent the rest of his life. And then and then after he died, he was born as the celestial sage Devarishi Narada. So having this one vision is grace that makes uh, Narada in that story and Parikshit here obsessed with just that, getting that one vision, and therefore looking for it, and therefore being always thinking of God, thinking of Bhagwan. So Parikshit, that's why he's called Parikshit, because he examines everything everywhere to see this form. So anyway, after this form vanished in his womb, he was still in the womb for some time, and then at the right time, when all the stars were in the most appropriate position, in the most auspicious hour, was born this beautiful child who was named, who we will see the name, because his name is not kept as Parikshit. Parikshit is the name given to him because of this one quality of him examining everything for the vision of the Supreme Being. So now that this child is born, everyone was delighted, and Yudhishtira was so happy. So here also to notice that Parikshit is actually the grandson of Arjuna. All the other sons of the five Pandavas have been killed, and there is no one else to continue this line except this one grandson of Arjuna. And Yudhishthira is so happy, so delighted at the line of the Pandavas continuing with this beautiful child. So he gives away a lot of gifts as soon as the child is born. He gives away gold and cows and land and horses and food grains and so on. So this is another important thing to notice in Vedic culture. We see this in Ramayana too. Uh, there is always a great generosity in giving on all events. The way to celebrate an event is not by gratifying the senses in with some party of some kind, which only makes us later regret in so many ways, but to celebrate by giving. And this is a very beautiful thing that, if we see clearly, it makes so much sense, because those who have wealth, as Yudhishthira does here, they use every opportunity to distribute the wealth in the right way. They don't give it whimsically, of course. It's very wrong to do that to some causes which are very partial and which can only create more damage in the long run. But to give it to people who are rooted in the wisdom of the realization of God, and who act out of that wisdom to whether give food or whether give education and all the rest. So even today, there are so many good organizations who are rooted in spiritual wisdom and doing a lot of good work at the social level, and they are worthy of being donated. when one has extra wealth, because one has to recognize that all the wealth is going to be taken away upon death. So the anyway it's going to be given away without our consent. So it's better to give it away with consent and for the right purpose to the right people while we are still able to do so. So it is intelligence to not simply save beyond a certain point and just die with a huge balance in order to be taken away by some random people, but to give it away in the right way, in the most responsible way, in a dharmic way for the um, propagation of the right dharma in society. So that's what Yudhisthira does. And after he does so, he addresses the Brahmanas and he says, please tell us how this boy is going to be. And the Brahmanas address him, the ones who chant all the Vedic mantras and all that on upon his birth. They address him that by the will of providence, the entire race, though had died out, we have the one beautiful child which has been protected by the grace of Krishna, who is Vishnu, and therefore we will name him Vishnu Rata. That's the name they give him because Krishna is non different from Vishnu. And in this particular pastime, he uses the Sudarshana Chakra as Vishnu to protect Parikshit, and therefore they give him the name Vishnu Rata. And then Yudhishthira asks, "Tell us how this child will grow on to be and what will be his reputation." These are well versed in astrology and everything, so they beautifully narrate about his character, this boy who's born, and they say that he will protect his subjects like Ikshwaku. So they take so many beautiful examples and tell how this boy will be. They say he will protect his subjects like Ikshwaku and be devoted to truth like Rama. So, for those who don't know, Ikshwaku is the very first king in whose line Ram was born. It is the Surya Vamsha or solar dynasty. So, in Valmiki Ramayana, when Narada comes to meet Valmiki, and Valmiki asks, "Tell me about the one being I should write about," the very first verse that Narada speaks to introduce Rama has Ikshwaku. He says, "Ikshwaku Vamsha Prabhavo Ramo Nama Janaishrutaha." He says, in the lineage of Ikshwaku is born a great being by the name Rama. That's how he starts talking about Ram. So Ikshwaku is the first king in the line of Ram. So he says Ikshwaku, uh, Parikshit will be like Ikshwaku in protecting his subjects, and he will also be like Ram himself in being true to his word. The verse here it says Satya Sandascha Ramo Dasharathir Yatha. Dasharathi is another name for Rama, means son of Dasharatha. So he says, because Ram can mean many Rams. So in Bhagavatam, in many places, Ram refers to also Balaram. So to be very clear, here he says Ramo Dasharathir. So just as the son of Dasharatha Ram was, Parikshit will be true to his word. Satya Sandascha Ramo Dasharathir. Then he will be very generous. Yudhishthira himself is very generous, we saw, and it's a the Brahmanas say that Parikshit will also be very generous. He will extend the fame of the whole dynasty, and he will be a great archer like his own grandfather Arjuna. He will be unconquerable. And then they say his quality in one verse, which is very beautiful for all humans to understand and to look at because it covers all aspects of what is a noble man. They say he will be heroic or valorous like a lion. That is, he'll be very courageous like a lion. He will be worthy of giving resort to whole everyone, that is, like the Himalayas. He will put up with any difficulty, endure like earth, and he will be always forbearing. That is to say, he will always, no matter what happens, He will be unconditionally loving like parents. So these are four qualities that they refer to. The verse also, it's so nice to read this verse. Mrigendra iva vikranto nishevyo himavaniva titikshur vasudhevasau sahishnuhu pitaraviva. So Mrigendra iva vikranto means he'll be courageous like the lion. So courage or fearlessness is so important, to not be cowardly, to be inwardly strong and bold, and also at the same time be a refuge for anyone. So anyone who comes to us, they can they need to be able to depend on us as Himalayas, just as Himalayas offers refuge for anyone who goes. So they say Nishevyo Himavaniva, like Himalayas, he gives refuge to all. Titikshur Vasudhevasau. So like the earth, he will endure anything. No matter what happens, he will endure it equanimously. The earth doesn't complain, and neither will Parikshit. He will not complain. And Sahishnuhu Pitaraviva, and he will tolerate and unconditionally love as parents do. Parents unconditionally love their children no matter what, and he will similarly, Parikshit will love his subjects unconditionally. And this is a beautiful set of qualities that any human being can look at, not as an ideal to simply copy, but as a truth of our living. If we can truly inquire within and recognize the falsity of fear, the falsity of insecurities, the falsity of um, being complaining, and if we are free of all this, then we can naturally manifest valor, being able to be a source of comfort for others, being able to equanimously handle everyone, and being unconditionally loving. So that's what Parikshit is known to be, as already prophesied by these seers. And then they say one more verse which is very beautiful. They compare him with Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. They say he will be even minded like Brahma, he will be full of grace like Shiva, and he will support all living beings like Vishnu. So that's again another beautiful verse, because these are three qualities which are part of the three aspects. So Brahma is the creator, and therefore he is even minded. He creates everyone with the same, every being, every aspect of this universe is being created even mindedly. There is no favoritism. Everyone is created uniquely, and everyone is created in their own way. There is no one like another person. Each person is endowed with uniqueness, and that's Brahma's even-mindedness. And Shiva is known for grace. Everything about Shiva is grace. Shiva is in fact the very embodiment of, that's why the Guru Tattva as Sadashiva. And Shiva, even his annihilation is an act of grace. That which gets rid of suffering, that which gets rid of attachment, is all through the grace. So any manifestation of grace is Shiva. And then providing refuge for everyone, sustaining this whole universe, is Vishnu. So the verse again is also nice here. Pitamaha samah samye prasade girishopamah ashrayah sarvabhutanam yatha devo ramashrayah. So Pitamaha samah samye. Pitamaha is a name for Brahma, the grand father, the original father of all, the creator, that is. He's not, he's still not independent creator. The independent source of everything is the supreme being, but from that springs forth this creative energy which is Brahma, and therefore he is called Pitamaha, the original grandfather. So Pitamaha Samasamye, so even minded like Brahma. Prasade Girishopamaha. Girish is the name for Shiva. Giri is mountain, and Shiva is always known to be the lord of mountains, whether it's Kailash or whether it's Arunachala. Mountain is associated with Shiva. So Girish is the lord of mountains, and Prasada is grace. So Prasade Girishopamaha. He is full of grace like Shiva, and Ashraya Sarva Bhutanam, and he'll sustain or protect all living beings. Yatha Devo Ramashtraya. Ramashtraya is a name for Vishnu, one who is the refuge of Rama. Rama is another name for Lakshmi. So one who offers refuge to Rama, which is Lakshmi, also offers refuge to all living entities. And as in that way, Parikshit will be a source of refuge to all living entities. So this is how they are describing Parikshit so poetically, and it's so beautiful how they bring the most unique and most worshipable quality of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and bring it all as a beautiful metaphor for describing how Parikshit will be. And then they also continue to say that he will be high minded, always following Krishna. He'll be very generous, very pious. He'll be firm like Bali. Some characters that are referred to are again great devotees who will be described in detail later in Bhagavatam. Bali is a great devotee who offers himself to Bhagavan, and in the Vamana Avatara. So he says he'll be like Bali in firmness, and Parikshit will be unflinching in his devotion like Prahalad. Prahalad is the greatest devotee who invoked the form of Narasimha, man lion. And the story of Prahalad is so full of sweetness and at the same time the highest wisdom. And we will look into it in great detail when it comes. But here it's all referred to as a glimpse. It says Parikshit will be having devotion like Prahalad and firmness like Bali. He will perform a lot of right fire sacrifices. He will continue this line by creating many successors to carry on this beautiful and auspicious line of Pandavas. He will subdue Kali. They are on the cusp of Kali Yuga. We already saw that this all these events are happening on the cusp of Dwapara Yuga and Kali Yuga. So here the Brahmanas say he will subdue Kali. And finally, they also say that he will hear of his impending death by a snake, Takshaka, and due to the curse of a Brahmana's son, a Rishi's son. And with that curse, after hearing that, he will renounce all attachment and take refuge in Hari, and he will sit down on the Ganga and listen to Shuka Brahma Rishi, and listening to Bhagavatam and surrendering completely to Hari, he will attain the eternal fearless state of freedom. So this is how they give the whole coming history of Parikshit in a very precise and very brief way. And Yudhishtira is very happy to hear all this. And Yudhishtira gives them a lot of gifts and sends them. And then after that, this child who is gifted and who is always, as we said, lingering on this form of Krishna or Narayana in his thought, is always holding the supreme person, the supreme being in his thought, and hence he is called Parikshit, as we saw. And he is being taken care by his grandparents. We know that his father is no more. His father Abhimanyu died even while he was in the womb, and it was his mother who delivered him. And so his grandfathers take care of him like their own son, and he grows up just as the moon waxes beautifully into a full moon. He grows up and he becomes a young man. So some years have passed by, and meanwhile, Yudhishthira holds again. It's been a many years, so he holds a beautiful grand fire sacrifice for which all the Pandavas, the remaining four brothers, they consult with Krishna, and they collect wealth and collect all the necessary uh, equipments and paraphernalia, whatever is necessary for the fire sacrifice. And Krishna also comes. So it's been many, many years since Krishna went back to Dwaraka, and all these are happening in Hastinapura, and Parikshit has grown into a young man. And So Krishna now comes after a long time to officiate these beautiful fire sacrifices. And Yudhishthira does all these fire sacrifices. Everybody is happy. Parikshit is grown. And now, after all this is over, Krishna again takes leave. And this time, Arjuna goes with Krishna to Dwaraka. So this will be the last time that Krishna comes to Hastinapura. And knowing this, somehow Arjuna, who is his dearest friend, this time accompanies him all the way to Dwaraka. And he goes to Dwaraka along with Krishna and along with Uddhava and Satyaki and all the usual dear companions of Krishna. And therefore they go towards Dwaraka again, this time with Arjuna, while here everybody is now uh, going on with ruling this kingdom, and now with this young prince who is quite grown into a capable prince who is capable of taking over. And that's where we are ending the 12th chapter. We will look into how now Parikshit, being an able prince, becomes an emperor in the next couple of chapters, and what transpires before that, which are very important for that to happen. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.